Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark McDonald. I have the pleasure of being the president of the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation, and we'd like to welcome you all to this afternoon's seminar. The Trust is partnered with the National Park Service and the Georgia African American Preservation Network to bring you this webinar as part of our African American Preservation Program here at the Trust. Today's session is going to be led by Megan Bruhn, who's Chief of State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants Division of the National Park Service. And she will go over grant opportunities available through the National Park Service. We will follow this up with another webinar in August that will be focused on grant writing for those interested in applying for these and other grants. So please mark your calendars. We have your contact information. So you will be the first to know once registration opens for that session. And just want to say, we've at the Trust have worked with the Park Service on 3 really important and significant grants that they've made to African American institutions here in Georgia. And we really want to encourage everyone to take advantage of these great opportunities while they're available. And just a quick housekeeping note or two, we are recording the session and we will share it with everyone who has signed up for the meeting today. And we'd also like to ask everyone to stay muted throughout the presentation, and there will be an opportunity for some questions and answers later on. So thank you, Megan. We're so glad to have you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say to us today.
Great. Thank you for having me. This is exciting to chat with y'all. I was actually just back home in South Carolina for a week at the beach in Hilton Head, so close to Georgia, for a week last week. So it's good to be back down south. So let me share this PowerPoint real quick, which is always the adventure to make sure it works. Okay, are y'all seeing that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right, well, let's get started. Well, thank you for the introduction. I also want to introduce Katherine Carey, who's here on my staff. She's our Outreach and Education Coordinator. And she's the one you're probably going to be calling if you've got questions. So I'm putting her out there for that from the start here. But we are based in the Park Service's Partnerships Office. So we aren't on the park side. But we do more of the program side and work with state, tribal, local, and nonprofit partners all over the country. And our division has a fairly long name of State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants. So we shorten that up and call it Steel Pig. And we embrace the pig part of it. So if you can't remember where to find us, think about pigs and, and money, I guess, and that works. And oh my gosh, I see Nancy Tinker's face, who I haven't seen in ages. So good to see you. Okay, so we're up in DC, and our major role in life is managing the Federal Preservation Partnership Program. So that's where the state preservation offices, 59 of those, tribal historic preservation offices, we have 208 of those now, and our certified local government program, which we have over 2,080 communities in, all come together. And the main way we facilitate that is through grants from the Historic Preservation Fund. And that's a fund that's been around since 1977. It was implemented to help us do the work that the National Historic Preservation Act put in place in 1966. So for many years, the fund has kind of helped, but we have gotten a plethora of funding as of late. So money is kind of growing on trees, it feels like right now. So we have the most funding and the most number of programs we've ever had in the history of the fund. So I would like to say this will last forever, but I know better that it may not. So now is the time to take advantage of this funding that's out there. And hopefully, as we run through everything today, you will find some kind of money that we have that might be a good fit for one of your projects there in Georgia. So the fund is really divided into 2 parts. So we have our non-competitive grant programs and then the competitive side. We're going to spend more time on the competitive side today, but the non-competitive programs have funding that's accessible too. So I wanted to point that out. Think of these as block grants that go out to our state and tribal partners. This is what runs that state historic preservation office that you likely have first contact with. If you're looking at a tax credit project, National Register nomination, certified local government activity, those types of things, because we ask the states to run those programs for us in exchange for that funding every year. So they then are also tasked with giving 10% of the funding that they get out to certified local governments. So that's about 5.5 million or so roughly now, but that is funding that is set aside just for those CLG communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. The other part of this is similar funding that goes to our tribal historic preservation offices. They get less money, unfortunately, and there's a lot more of them. So usually we fund about half to maybe one position in their preservation offices. So if you are working with your tribal partners, you might have some TIPOs to engage with as well. So the certified local governments, this is usually when we're in person, I ask you to raise your hand if if you're in one or not, but I guess we can kind of do that. But anyway, these are communities across the country that have made a local commitment to do historic preservation. And so they've entered into an agreement with their state office and the National Park Service. They have established a local preservation commission, and we really view them as the experts in preservation on the local stage. So we have over 2,080 of those across the country. We usually grow by about 30 new communities each year. And if you're not sure if you are one or not, this is where to find it. And you can look that up and also find out who your state coordinator is if you're interested in finding out more about the program. Now, one of the key things to know about this and why you want to be a CLG is as we go through those competitive grant programs, there's a couple grant programs that are only available to CLGs. So we do make that partnership, hopefully an opportunity as well. We've developed a CLG Gateway app that is available online, and this was intended kind of as a communication piece between our national parks and our local communities that are gateways. 85% of our CLGs are gateways to national parks, and we know that they experienced unique pressures because of that with visitation and development and things like that. So an idea of helping parks and CLGs communicate, but it also shows you where other federal lands are, heritage areas, and we've even added an updated data layer that shows where Main Street communities cross over with our certified local governments and provide some contact information there. So if you're in one of these communities, there's a lot of information you might be able to gain out of this app that we have available on our website. So I wanted to touch on that briefly. Two of the other kind of partnerships that we've been working on to give you a sense of kind of what we do outside of just giving out grants is working on community disaster and resiliency training. So unfortunately, I think we've all been involved, and you guys certainly have in your area with hurricanes and disasters and fires and those types of things. So we've been working with the National Main Street Center to build a disaster training program for communities that's tailored to main streets, those businesses. And that's a little bit of a different way that you're going to react to a disaster or flooding situation. We've done these workshops in Louisiana and Virginia so far, and we'll have one coming up in Florida. So that might be something your community is interested in hosting. And we help them kind of develop these trainings so then they can go on and continue them. The other partnership that we have going on this similar vein is with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. Used to actually be based in Georgia, and now it's in Norfolk, Virginia. We've developed a new camp training that focuses on disaster resiliency. So that is another offering that we've kind of helped them work on. And then we're all excited about attending the NAPC Forum, which will be next month. I can't believe it's next month already, in Cincinnati, Ohio. So certainly a great opportunity to come and attend and be with other local preservationists and learn from them and steal their good ideas. So that might be something you want to look at and consider. And it'll be in person, which will also be different and fun, hopefully. Just as a kind of a resource for you, we have loaded up about over 2,000 examples of projects that the Historic Preservation Fund has paid for over the years. And we've curated this. These are kind of the best of the best. And they're located in our IRMA system. So this is a bit of a library repository. But if you're undertaking any kind of project like these that often CLG grants pay for, but some of our bigger grants do too, like design guidelines, heritage tourism plans, we have a lot of walking tours, those types of things. There's some really good examples in here, and I'd encourage you to look at this resource and have some examples to show those consultants. Show them what you like. So maybe you don't just get a cookie cutter kind of product, but you may be able to see some things that might work well for your community. So a good resource for you. And just to let y'all know, there's a lot of information in this PowerPoint. So happy to provide it to share out to all of you afterwards, so you don't have to take super frantic notes anyway. Okay, well, let's talk about the competitive grant programs, because that's probably what you're most interested in. That's where all the money is, right? So we have currently, I keep losing count, 7 now, I think. I don't know anymore. Competitive grant programs that Congress has blessed us with, and they keep coming up with new ones, so we'll see. But these are what we're going to focus on and talk about this afternoon. And just as a way of kind of background, we did have some competitive programs prior. So Save America's Treasures and Preserve America we had for some time. And then we had a bit of a hiatus when they weren't funded. And then some programs came back in 2014 and have continued. But interestingly, the focus has been very much on underrepresented communities and looking at telling the diverse history of America. And this is just kind of an example of some of the different communities that we have been working with and funding. And I think that's a real important piece of these grant programs that we have right now. Certainly, I think we're telling some amazing stories and working with some amazing people that perhaps historic preservation hasn't touched as often as we have others. So one of the things we're active in anyway. So our African American Civil Rights Program has been around since 2016. It's grown every year. And it started out with a focus on strictly this, what we think of as civil rights, you know, the 50s, 60s movement, those kinds of activities that occurred. And then as kind of the need came forward with the grant program, it's been expanded. So we can now fund everything from transatlantic slave trade forward. So really telling the whole history of the struggle for African Americans for equal rights in our country. This is important, I think, and we've learned that there were a lot of civil rights struggles that started way before the time we kind of think of. And this program does a variety of projects. So it focuses on one side is preservation, so physical preservation of historic sites. You can see this example here is 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, where the bombing took place. And we did a lot of work on their Claire story. They've actually gotten multiple grants from us. And then we also fund history projects. So these can range from surveys of entire states for African American resources to National Register nominations, context studies. We also have done some exhibits. We've done oral histories to help document where activities took place. And of course, those are very important right now as that generation is leaving us, unfortunately. And we've recently opened it up to include collections. So we had seen a few applications coming through of collections from that civil rights era, and they didn't really have a place to get that conservation. So photographic collections, film, those types of things would also be eligible for that side. So the history projects are a bit broader. One of the important things about all federal grants is knowing if you're an eligible applicant. Some of our programs, it's a little bit more wide open, like this one. It states tribes, local governments, and nonprofit organizations. But some are a little more focused. So being aware of that when you go to apply for a federal grant is super important. So this one is a bit broader, and you can see the money is quickly moving upwards. We do have 22 million that will be available, and those applications will be opening up in July. So that's a thing to keep your eye on. There is no match required for these grants, and you'll see that with a lot of our programs, mainly except for Save America's Treasures, and we'll remind you of that. but match is not required, but we do treat it as a competitive factor. So if you're able to show that your community is willing to invest some time and resources, maybe it's just in kind or donations, but having that local buy-in is always kind of an important piece to add if you can. If not, we understand. The history grants, we've recently increased all of the maximums on our grants. So it has gone from, those have gone from $50,000 up to $75,000. And then our preservation grants have gone from $500,000 to $750,000. A lot of this is to reflect what we've all seen in growing costs, inflation, construction costs, those types of things to help fund those projects appropriately. And as I said, these applications will be available in July. Katherine likes my story about Leona Tate, so I'll tell it one more time. This is Leona Tate being escorted to school in New Orleans at McDonough 19 School. And it's pretty amazing story of her and 3 friends that integrated the school. I got the opportunity to just tour the site with her and walk around, and she told us stories about how they couldn't really leave their classroom. If they went to the cafeteria, they were afraid they would be shot, and just really painted the picture of the reality of the situation. Well, she and those classmates have purchased the school from the school district. They've gotten a civil rights grant and a Savior Maker's Treasures grant from us. They've rehabilitated the school, turned it into senior housing in a community center. So it's back serving as a part of the community, which it always did. They also received, there was also a larger grant for the state that did civil rights markers. And one of those markers is in front of the school. But probably the most special story she told was the federal marshal that escorted her. He felt like, looking back on his career, which was pretty significant, this was one of the most important things he'd ever done. So he chose to have his ashes buried or scattered on the site. And so I think it's these kinds of stories that we're trying to preserve and tell. They're not always pleasant stories, especially with the diversity associations, but they're definitely stories that we need to tell and places that we need to save along with those stories. So I think we as staff really feel like this is an important role that we're playing and the Park Service is playing at this time. So just wanted to share that little bit with you. One of the spin-offs of our African American Civil Rights Program is our History of Equal Rights program. And this is basically a bit broader. We want to preserve those sites that are related to the struggle of all Americans looking for equal rights in this country. And there is also no match required for this one too, very similar to our civil rights program, but a smaller dollar amount. So we've focused this one on just doing physical preservation and not doing the history side of things. We'll have 4.6 million available for this. So, this can be fairly broad. African American sites are of course welcome to apply for this one as well. But the struggle for women's suffrage, of course, is represented here with Alice Paul's childhood home. She was a ardent suffragette, helped write the Equal Rights Amendment, hunger strikes, etc. But we're looking at a broad array of these things. It could be labor union kind of struggles and things like that. So what equal rights means can be broad, of course. Same kind of funding range on these. And we have enabled these to come in for what we call pre-preservation work. And that can be maybe some architectural or engineering studies for the building, that planning kind of piece that you might need to do first before you come back in for a larger preservation grant. And that's always a good idea if you're not quite shovel ready, as they say, to do that pre-planning and show that you're really ready to handle a federal grant of a large size. These applications are actually available right now on grants.gov, and they will be due on September 13th. So if you have a story that would fit this program, take a look. Our HBCU program is one of our oldest competitive programs and is really focused on saving National Register listed sites on HBCU campuses. We've broadened that a little bit in the last year or two and are now including eligible buildings. So One thing I did fail to mention with the last two programs is some of our programs required the property to be already listed in the National Register or at a certain level of significance. Some we can take eligible properties. So for both African American civil rights, history of equal rights, and now HBCUs, as long as you can document that that property is eligible for listing in the National Register, that's usually done with some documentation from your state historic preservation office, then you're eligible to apply. If you're not already listed though, as part of that project, you're going to need to do a National Register nomination. So figuring that into your budget is important because at the end of the project, we will need to see that the property has been listed. So keep that in mind if you're one of those eligible but not listed properties yet. This program will also do work on preservation plans for campuses and will pay for National Register nominations as well. We have 10 million to award in 2022. We're right now working on awarding the 21 money, and those applications will open in the fall. So again, no match required on these. So if you have a partnership with one of the HBCUs in Georgia, which I know there are several, this will be a great program to take advantage of. Our Underrepresented Communities is the program that kind of started this effort in 2014 when our funding kind of came back. And I like to call this one the little engine that could. It's really focused primarily on survey and nomination to the National Register with the intent of telling the stories that are underrepresented. And we've done a great job of telling certain stories throughout history. And even at those sites that tell those important stories of our national leaders and things, this program can look at telling the stories of the other people that were on those sites, be it the women, be it the labor, be it the servants, those types of things. So this project can go out and do surveys. We've done a lot of surveys. An example here is of the city of Portland is doing an LGBTQ survey. The other end is one of those historic sites. Included in that, we've done statewide surveys for African American resources, Asian American resources, Asian Pacific, those types of things. And then we've done a lot of National Register nominations. And that includes the amendment of older National Register nominations. So some of those are real old and have like 3 sentences in them. And some may not tell the full story. So those are things that this program can do. No match is required, and we've gotten a significant bump up for this program at 1.25 million. And those applications are also open right now. So now's the time to apply. Those are due August 10th. This is one of those programs where you need to be a little bit special to apply though. States, tribes, and certified local governments may apply. So if you're a nonprofit, you're going to need to partner with one of those entities to apply directly. And we have, of course, seen that happen, but this is a little more limited in the applicant pool. Our Tribal Heritage Program is actually our oldest competitive grant program. We've been awarding funding since 1990 to federally recognized tribes, as well as Alaskan Native and Native Hawaiian communities. So this is a way to broaden our funding a little bit past the 208 tribal historic preservation officers we have to encompass all tribal entities in the country. And these grants are, they do typical preservation projects, but they also get more into promoting and preserving unique cultural heritage and traditions. So we've done a lot of maybe the preserving of methods of basket weaving or plant gathering, canoe making, those types of things are some of the broader types of projects that we do, as well as oral histories are a very significant piece, language preservation and education, those types of things. You can kind of see that in this example of the Hula Preservation Society, a great meeting that they do every year. They even did it during COVID by Zoom. Started in 1940, and the idea being to teach the hula dance traditions to the younger generation. And they did a lot of oral history documentation of how they go about doing that. This funding will open up in the fall, and the amounts are a little bit smaller. They go up to 75,000 because we have about $500,000 usually available for this program. So if you're working with a tribal partner, or we have any tribes on this call, this will certainly be a great opportunity for you to look at. And then kind of our big flagship program for a long time has been Save America's Treasures. You may have heard of it. It came to us for the millennium. It kept going for a while. It went away. Now she's back with quite a bit of funding. But the idea of this program is to preserve and conserve nationally significant buildings and collections. We do this program in partnership with the National Endowment of the Arts, the Humanities, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services. So a little bit unique that we have 4 federal agencies working together on this. We have funded projects all over the country, and one of the keys to this program, because it is written in statute, so it can only be changed by Congress, is that a building or collection can only be funded once by Save America's Treasures. So one of the big keys to this is making sure that that building or that collection piece hasn't already been funded, and we actually have a map online that'll help you know that if you don't. Eligible applicants is pretty broad: state, tribes, local governments, and nonprofits, but this is the program that requires match, and that is by statute, by law. So dollar for dollar non-federal match, that does not have to be all cash for us. It can be in kind, it can be donated services, and you don't necessarily have to have it all in place at the time of application. What we do want to see is that you have a good plan for raising it, though. So if you've got a few applications into some foundations, maybe you've got some state funding secured, those types of things, make sure you tell us what your plan is for that. And then as long as you're spending those matching funds along with your federal dollars, you have the life of the grant to continue to raise them. So don't panic too much about not having the match in hand. This program has jumped up tremendously, and we're at over 26 million to be awarded in 2022. We're currently working on the award of the 21 grants. So again, increase our maximum 750,000 for both collections and preservation. And these will open in the fall. There's a couple things to keep in mind with this one is that listing. So if you're a building or site, you need to be listed at the national level of significance. So at the time of application. So that means you have to be either a National Historic Landmark, listed individually or part of a National Historic Landmark district, like say Savannah, or you need to be listed in the National Register at the national level of significance. So in the register, you can be listed at national, state, and local. You will need to be at the national level to compete in this program. That means the first step is go to your state historic preservation office and make sure you're eligible to compete on the building side. That's a key. If you're not nationally significant, then you're out. There are ways to maybe raise that level of significance, but that's definitely something you need to talk to your state historic preservation office about and make sure that you had their support, and then it's a process to work through. On the collection side, you just need to make a case in your application for why that collection is nationally significant. So a little bit more flexible on that side. Our Paul Bruhn historic revitalization grants are, I guess I shouldn't say they're new anymore. They've been around for a while, but they're very popular. And this is a bit unique for us. It's a little bit more like our certified local government program. So in essence, we're funding a program. We're giving you money to run a program. We're not funding one specific project. What you are applying to us for is this sub-grant program, and you're telling us what sites you're going to focus on, how you're going to award that money, how you're going to manage that money and report on it, and how you're going to put in place easements and those types of things. So you're really telling us, giving us a program design as part of your application. We have 10 million to award in 2022. We're currently, actually, we just awarded the 2021 grants. And these grants need to be focused in areas that are considered rural. So even if you're in a big city, you're going to be focusing on counties that are considered rural. And our definition of rural is under 50,000 as defined by the US Census. Some of our applicants have chosen to go smaller and said they're only going to look at communities under 10,000, and they're going to focus on Main Street properties. There's also an economic development piece to this. So it should be for properties in rural areas that are going to help spur economic development. So we've seen applications that focus on historic theaters within their state in rural communities. So African American resources. So you may want to provide kind of a thematic focus to your program, or an area focus, or those types of things. So type of resource. So it really is kind of a big flexible program. Those grants do go up to 750,000, and there is no match, and those will be open in the winter. This is a program I encourage you strongly to talk to us about before you apply, and make sure like your concept is kind of matching up with what the program can do. We're doing better at that, but we get a lot of folks that apply for just one building in this program, and that's not what this program does. So just be aware of that. This one's a little bit more complicated, but doing some really great things. It also is fairly competitive. So making that application stand out is pretty important. Our last competitive program is our newest one, is our semi-quincentennial grants. We're working on getting these out right now, but we know that we have another 10 million to give away on this program. Congress gave us some very specific language on this one, and when they do that, we can't change it. We get stuck with it. So this is for the preservation of state-owned sites listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So first you have to be state-owned, next you have to be listed, and then you need to be involved in the founding of the nation. So for our program right now, it's sites that were constructed prior to December 31st, 1800. So that's the shifts that we have between parties and have a peaceful election, and really shows the establishment of the US as being created. We are looking at shifting this a bit, maybe expanding it a bit. So keep an eye on that. But this is kind of the basic premise as it stands right now. 10 million for 2022. There is no match required for these as well. And this is another one that I would probably encourage you to come and talk to us about. Many folks can apply for this: states, tribes, local governments, and nonprofits. So it might be you're a nonprofit that has a long-term lease on a state-owned property. That would work. But those are kinds of the things you might want to talk through with us. So that one's fairly new, but we know we'll have it for at least another year. Now, I have reeled off a ton of information here about our grant programs and how do you keep up with it all. I mean, I can barely keep up. So one of the best ways is to sign up for our bulletin, and you can do that at go.nps.gov/bulletin. Look for the Historic Preservation Fund when you sign up. It's a federal system, so it's a little bit clunky. But this will enable you to get bulletin updates via your email whenever we announce a new grant program, or whenever we award grants, and any other kind of major events. We don't try to flood your inbox, so if we are sending something, it is fairly important. But this is one of the best ways to kind of keep up with everything that's going on in our grant world. And then this is the other way to get in touch with us. So our main phone number, 202-354-2020, and our main inbox. So Steel Pig, there's that pig again, at nps.gov. Both of those are answered daily, often checked multiple times a day. And if you do send us an email, if it's something the team that checks that box can't answer, they will get it to a member of the team that can. So we do take the responses to those very seriously. It's also a good way to get in touch with Katherine if you need to find her, and I'm sure she'll share her email in a bit. But this is one of the good ways to kind of find out what we've got going on. The other things that we have as resources, we do have on our YouTube channel, which is Heritage and Historic Preservation, a lot of videos, several videos on how to apply for the specific grant programs. We're actually in the process of updating those right now for each program, as well as some information on how to manage federal grants in general, and those types of things. So there's always a little bit of, I guess, science to managing a federal grant and applying for a federal grant. And we're happy to help with that. I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna turn it over to Katherine if she would like to give you some advice on, can you apply for a grant at the last minute? No, and that's what she's gonna tell you a little bit about how not to do that. And then we can answer questions.
Right. Well, as you all probably just heard, there are a couple of grant programs that are currently open right now, Underrepresented Communities and History of Equal Rights. So if either of those are of interest to you, do not panic. You still have time to pull an application together for those. And as Megan mentioned, African American Civil Rights will probably be opening next, and that will be next month. So I just mentioned planning. I just wanted to say that I think to have a successful application, it requires some planning. So please take some time with your team and pull things together to be successful with that. I am always here to answer questions for folks, so don't hesitate to reach out. Megan hasn't mentioned the process itself, but we do use grants.gov, which is not us. So you can relay your problems to me. I can try to help problem solve for you. Grants.gov actually does a really good job, I think, of they have 24/7 like turnaround service for issues, and they can assist you as well. But to even get started, you're going to need a UEI number, and you get that from sam.gov. So I can help you with that if you're not familiar. I can provide some resources, sample grants, checklists, things like that to aid you if you're new to federal grant writing. What else, Megan? I guess we always say it's, you all know your projects super well. I would say to you, if you have an opportunity to hand over your application to someone that's not familiar with the project before you submit it, to please do that. Those eyes might be the best eyes to identify things that just don't make sense to someone other than your group, your organization reading that grant. And just the same, I guess I would also say, I know a lot of people lately have told me that they have gotten bids, they've had bids for a while that they're going to use, and just there's so much change and expense right now that I would really recommend that if you're holding on to bids from some time ago, that you go back and have those looked at and adjust them accordingly to make sure that your project is feasible for what you're making application for.
I guess the only other thing I would add, and I guess I must have turned off a slide or something anyways, is making sure that you're using the correct application forms, like you're not using last year's, check your math, check those kind of basic things. And like Katherine said, don't be the only set of eyes, because that's important. The other thing we always encourage is grants is a competitive process. And unfortunately, not everyone gets funded. So if you're not funded, even if you are funded, we are happy to provide you with your comments. And usually by the time you've made it through our internal review and then a panel review, you've had 5 or 6 experts looking at your project. And so there's a lot of really good information there. So I encourage you to ask for those. We do kind of have a really good memory. We're kind of like elephants as grant managers. So if you apply again and we haven't seen kind of those comments addressed in your next application, we do have this amazing ability to remember that. So so just do take advantage of that. I think it's a real good opportunity to have some feedback and input to that. But that's about all I can think of right now, and we'll be happy to answer some questions if you want to do that. Or
great, thank you both so much. Yeah. So if anyone has questions, feel free to add those in the chat right now. I know we have gotten some questions about a recording of this, and yes, we will definitely send out a copy of the recording as well as the slides in a follow-up email. But if anyone has any other questions, feel free to send them our way.
Danielle, I got one question in the chat that said, are any of these grants available for African American cemeteries?
So Megan, I'm going to let you touch on that. I've talked to the grant leads about this a couple of times. I'll let you.
Yes, and maybe no. The problem with cemeteries in general, and for those of you that are preservationists, you know this on this call, is often they are difficult to list in the National Register. So it's that kind of eligibility piece that is a bit difficult for us. If you were able to, where the cemetery is already listed or it's part of a historic district. We've had cemeteries that maybe are on HBCU campuses or church sites that are listed, then there probably is a chance that we can fund those. Then you're going to have to make that case for why was this associated with civil rights to fit one of those programs that we have. We don't, I know there's a bill kind of floating in Congress for specifically for African-American burial grounds. That of course hasn't passed yet or any of that. So maybe there's something coming in the future. But right now I would first encourage you to look into that National Register listing piece. And then I would get in touch with us and we can help you see which program might be a good fit for that. But I think there's definitely civil rights cases to be made for a lot of African-American cemeteries based on their placement, maybe how they're marked, those types of things. And we have funded some with that program. So definitely is a possibility.
I just want to add, this is Katherine. I just want to add one more thing about just some items that can go in your budget. And Megan mentioned these again already, but I just want to make sure you did not miss this, that, properties that are not listed yet, that can be a piece of your budget. It's a great way to get the nomination written by a professional. And also, a lot of people say, oh, a lot of people are really struggling right now with staffing to be able to administer grants, what have you. There is a cap on the percentage that can go towards administering a grant and managing it, but it is there, and it's usually enough even for someone to be hired. I mean, people are hired to administer these grants for organizations sometimes. So please know that can be included in your budget as well.
Got another question in the chat. Oh, looks like you've answered it in the chat.
Oh, that's fine.
There you have it.
Yeah, the question was, do we have any examples of transatlantic slave trade sites? We haven't really, but I know there are some shipwreck sites. There's especially one off the coast of Mobile. That would be kind of an eligible site, I would say. Also, we have sites in our communities. I mean, I live in historic Alexandria. There's many sites that were associated with the slave trade. So that might not be why they're listed now, and that might be a story that needs to be told. And as part of that project, maybe we would ask for an amendment to those nominations to tell those stories. So, but I think there's a lot of we haven't tapped into that part of the story as much as other parts. So I think that would be a real important area for us to get some applications in.
Megan and Katherine, I'd just like to say thank y'all to you both. And I would like to address something to our audience, and that is, if any of you have any ideas of how the Georgia Trust could apply for some of these grants to help you in your work, especially I was thinking of the Paul Bruhn Grant Award for rural programs. I think we'd be very well open to your ideas and suggestions about programs that you think would help you in your work preserving African-American resources. So just let us know, reach out to me or to Danielle or to Ben, and we'll see if we can't come up with a good program that some of these grants could fund.
That would be great. And that's really the intent of that particular program, is that a stronger entity kind of comes in and gets that funding and then helps distribute it out to maybe smaller entities or even individuals, because that's not something we can fund as easily. So, yeah, that would be great.
Thanks.
Anybody else got a crazy special project out there that you're wondering how it would fit, now's your chance. You got the experts.
So we do have a question about whether a historic theater that operates today but hosted well-known African-American musicians in the 50s and 60s would still qualify for programming.
Certainly. If you can, at that point, that was certainly part of the story of equal rights, right? Or, the struggle that it was segregated, and it served as the segregated theater then. So telling that story as part of it, that definitely, and I think we've seen a couple like that we have funded. So yeah. And the fact it's still operational and doing the same thing, that's even more, that's a win, right?
I have a question about the application process. If we had a project, or someone has a project that they think might fit into more than one category, should they just apply to all of them? Should they call you all up and talk through it and see which one would be the best to pursue? Or is there a general application that might get sent to different categories? What's the best way to process that?
So I'm going to guess when you say category, you mean either history or preservation? Is that
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Those are usually separate funding announcements. So there's one, it's for civil rights. There'll be one notice of funding opportunity for the preservation side and one for the history side. There's nothing that says you can't apply for both at the same time. And if you have a distinct history project that could stand up separately from your preservation project, I would encourage you to put in 2 different applications. If there's a small part of the history project, that might meld into the preservation project, it's probably okay to include some of it, but I wouldn't want to be seeing more than like 15 to 20% of that project being kind of that history-based side of things. Now, a National Register nomination could certainly be part of a preservation application if that site's not listed. So, but there's nothing to stop you from applying for both sides. So I'd pick the one that makes the most sense. That would be a great conversation to have with Katherine.
I have that conversation a lot about not history versus preservation, but which program, to come in under. And I mean, I think Megan, we see that a lot, and it's really tough. I mean, Megan clearly, it's very open about how much funding is under, each program. So obviously those larger pools of money are good resources, but usually there's a stronger element to the specific project, and it's pretty clear which avenue you should come in under. But just reach out and I can help walk you through that as well. I know Mark also, he offered the possibility of them acting as an agent for you all, but there may be other of you on the call. I don't know all the organizations that you represent, but if you are a larger organization, or I don't know if there are community foundations on here or government agencies, but if you're someone that could also serve as an agent for someone that maybe doesn't quite have the capacity to pull one of these grants together, that's a really good service you could provide for your historic preservation community in Georgia.
So I see that we have a raised hand from Brianna Grosicki. Brianna, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question, you can do that.
Thanks, Danielle. This might be splitting hairs. If a resource is not listed as contributing in the nomination currently, or in the district currently, could the efforts to update the nomination to make it contributing be eligible costs for the civil rights grants?
It could. Certainly, if we needed to do a boundary expansion or something like that, if it's not in there because it's an older nomination that doesn't describe every site, I would say we need to get a reading on that from the state and the Park Service National Register staff.
Mhm.
to see if they would consider it contributing already, because sometimes that does happen. So we could take a look at that for you. But certainly, if the nomination then needed an update, that would be an eligible cost.
Great.
Mhm. And especially if you're working with those older nominations, not every site is listed, or a boundary might have been drawn around to take out a couple sites. And maybe now it's time to include it, those kinds of things. There's some other ways to do corrections to those that maybe don't involve an entire, new nomination process. So, but we have some friends over at the National Register we can work with to help you figure that out.
Great. So seeing no more questions on my end, Ben, if you see any, certainly pipe up. I think we can go ahead and bring this to a close. So thank you so much, both Megan and Katherine. I've included Katherine's email address in the chat, but we will include everyone's contact information in the follow-up email as well. So if you have other questions that occur to you later, you do have someone to reach out to with those questions.
Great. And I'll send you over the PowerPoint so you can share.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all so much for taking the time to spend with us. And I hope we see some applications from Georgia.
I
If
do.
not,
too.
we're going to come down there and get you.
Yes, come on, Georgia.
You all have
Thank
a
you very
wonderful
much.
afternoon.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.